Good evening. I'd like to call the North Augusta City Council study session for Monday, January 27, 2025 to order. And good to see everybody. Thank y'all for being here. And at this time, I'd like to turn it over to our City Administrator, Mr. Jim Clifford.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Council. We have a pretty full agenda this evening for review. So the first one we'll go over is next week's agenda items. Then we'll go into department details with our directors. And then we have 4 items under Mayor's Matters for focus items. First and foremost being a impact fee presentation by Carson Bice from Tischler Bice. Tommy Paradise will give an update on a development update for moratorium on apartments. We have a very brief update from Linda Williamson on Riverside Village financials, which is on the review on a quarterly basis. And lastly, I'll give just a few slides on the Hurricane Helene update, and we'll go from there. So with that, we'll move right into agenda review. And so the Council's first thing to look at is under old business. You've got your planning and development ordinance number 2025-01, change the corporate limits of the city of North Augusta by accepting petition requesting annexation by the landowners and annexing plus or minus 0.7 acres of property located at Edgefield Road, St. James Street, tax parcel 01205140004, owned by Adams Brothers Properties, second reading. So this was, I believe, the unanimous first passage through the City Council. There's no additional information to share on this particular parcel at this time. And so unless you had any particular questions on this one, we'll move into new business. Okay. What I'm going to do is lump items 7, 8, and 9 together. So you have ordinance number 2025-02, 03, and 04. These are all in relation to the Kellogg Tract, and to orient the council and Jamie or Ricky, if somebody can get the slide up on the tract itself. But this is in relation to a parcel that is directly behind Fire Station 3 on Belvedere Clearwater Road. So it's on the west side of Interstate 520 and sits directly behind Fire Station 3. So you can see where Vigilant Road is. There's a little red car out there. That's where the fire station is. And so this large parcel is directly behind that. And so what you have before you that has been through the Planning Commission is a request to annex that land, to zone that from critical areas to PD, and then to approve the overall general development plan for what we've been calling the Kellogg Plan track there. What I'd like to recommend to council this evening, and I know you probably have a lot of questions, and there's a lot of data and information here on the Kellogg tract, but what I would like to say is, even though the Planning Commission has heard this petition and has voted to move it to City Council for consideration of the split recommendation, ultimately I've got some concerns right now about the ability of the city to service this tract with infrastructure. And so I can't tell you definitively this evening, nor will I be able to tell you by next Monday, whether the impacts of the Kellogg tract would affect any infill development for things that are inside the city limits, which is the priority here within the city before we take annexations for large residential tracts. So again, there's a lot of data in here and there's some information to consider, and you're free to look at that. But my recommendation to Mayor and Council is to table this item, these 3 items next week, so that the staff can have some time to do a full infrastructure review. We're required to bring this to you. The applicant has gone through the Planning Commission. It is required for you all to be able to consider it. We did not want to ask the applicant to withdraw this because that resets the clock for them having to go back to the Planning Commission like a year later, and that was not our intent. So we're not trying to put the applicant at a disadvantage, but we do want to make sure that we have a full staff assessment to provide to the City Council before we make a recommendation on approval or disapproval for your action.
I think we accept Jim's recommendation. Just don't worry. Let's move on to the rest of number 10 today, and we'll just table it next week.
I agree.
Depends on the question.
Just to understand that map a little bit. The blue is county, right? Current county.
Well, it's on this one right here. All that's
No, on the right-hand side, Councilman, on the right-hand side of that is city. That's what we would call the Highland Tract or Adelaide,
Okay.
which
That's
is
the
right.
Highland Tract in the blue.
That's correct.
Alrighty. Okay. That's all. Thank you.
All right, so with that, we're going to go ahead and skip forward to items. So these will remain on the agenda for next week for consideration, but my recommendation at that time is to table it for future council action. So then we'll move into item number 10, Planning and Development, Resolution number 2025-02, accepting a deed of dedication for the water and sanitary sewer, along with a maintenance guarantee and cash deposit for Parker's Kitchen. Again, this is a pretty routine action that once a either development or commercial property is completed, and so our staff is satisfied with the conditions from Parker's Kitchen. And so again, a pretty routine item, something we'd like you to consider passage, but I'll pause for any questions on that one. Hearing none, we'll move into item number 11, Engineering, Resolution number 2025-03, authorizing the City of North Augusta to enter into professional engineering services contracts with multiple firms to perform design services for various storm drainage capital improvement projects. And so this is a item that Tom Zeser has put on the agenda for consideration. We were at the end of our contract term for the various contractors that we have that do that work for us on our behalf. And he has asked for us to be placed on the agenda so they can move forward with the selection of a new series of vendors and contractors to perform those services for the department. And if you have specific questions about the services provided, I'll defer that to Tom.
We'll
Yes,
have
sir.
that documented for the meeting on Monday.
Tom says yes.
Okay, perfect.
Moving on to number 12, Finance, Resolution number 2025-04, approving the annual assessment report and amendment of the assessment roll for the ballpark, the Village Municipal Improvement District, and confirming the collection of annual assessments therein for the 2024-2025 assessment year. And I would just say, if you have any specific questions on that one, I would just defer that to Linda when she does her presentation later on. And with that, we'll move to item number 14, Parks and Rec, Resolution number 2025-06, relating to the Department of Parks and Rec Department authorizing a grant application of the State of South Carolina Parks, Recreation, and Tourism Department for federal funding assistance to support a project submitted under the Recreation Trails Program, RTP, under the approval of the Federal Highway Administration. And so ultimately, what this would be requesting is a grant match for something we would do with Parks and Rec, and this would do parking lot improvements out there at the trailhead of the Palmetto Terrace, so right where the South Carolina DMV is on Skyview Lake Road. This would be for some improvements to that parcel next door, that's city property, and so ultimately there's a match requirement for this grant, and I believe that would match come out of the Capital Projects Fund for your consideration. But again, if you have specific questions about what this project would accomplish, I would defer to Rick for those comments.
Is there a meeting about it on Wednesday? Is this related? Okay.
And actually, Rick's going to talk a little bit about that in his department details.
Don't forget 13.
Did I skip lucky number 13?
You did.
Darn it. All right. Maybe there's just superstition. All right. So let me go back to item number 13. Well, first of all, let me ask if there are any questions on 14. Then I'll go to number 13, resolution number 2025-05, authorizing extensions of awarded allocation of the Accommodations Tax Advisory Committee for the disbursement of revenues from the Accommodations Tax year 2022 to 2023. And I would defer any questions on that to Jamie, since she was the one that put this together.
There's actually no resolution in your packet. However, the meeting will be held tomorrow with the ATAX for the extension, so the information will be in your packet on Friday.
Okay, perfect.
And as per our usual practice, I'll be providing an update on Hurricane Helene at the City Council meeting next week, as I will be doing this evening as well. And so with that, that concludes the agenda review for next week. And subject to your questions, we're going to move over to department details. Jamie, over to you.
First up will be Finance. Linda?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. A few quick updates from the Finance Department tonight. Cycle 1 due date will be February 3rd, and our Cycle 2 due date will be February 18th. We are working to get our tax notices ready, and we believe those will be ready to be sent to the printer on Wednesday of this week. So I would expect they will go out in the mail by the end of the week. Also, we are putting together our business license renewals, and we also expect those to go out in the mail at the end of the week.
I didn't get a chance to ask you about this earlier. Where are we on the, are we totally online now with the new water bill system? Or, 'cause
We
I'm
are not.
saying, but is some people getting it? 'Cause I'm
So,
seeing people on social media acting like they haven't
Currently, we
changed it.
have a online payment system up and running.
Okay.
Our utility billing is not live yet, and therefore our new portal isn't live yet. But we do have the ability to make the online payments, and it's really the problems we've seen are that you have to put your account number in and your billing name as it shows on your bill in order to get it to work or go to the next page. And I think there's also some technical things with browsers, which I'm not
Yeah, I've seen that.
technically
People talk about.
savvy enough to answer those questions, but it's got something to do with clearing out your cookies or whatnot. So it is a user end issue at this point versus a city program issue. If that makes
Mr. Mayor, just to
sense.
also to piggyback on that, we've got a follow-on meeting with GovSense this week to talk through some of the technical things. And the meat and potatoes of GovSense for us really has to do with utility billing. And there's a lot of other add-on functions to include permitting and things we're going to do through Tom and Tommy's department. But we're refocusing GovSense specifically on utility billing because that's the thing that the most amount of people are going to be touching. And we want to make sure that's right. And so we've got some asks in to GovSense. I think in my mind, I'd like to be able to just enter in whatever my utility bill number is and just have it auto-populate without having to add it in directly. Because if I forget my middle initial and put it in, it's not picking it up right now or whatever. So there's some technical things GovSense is still working through on our behalf. But that's where our focus for them from a technical perspective is to get the utility billing right first before we move into other aspects of GovSense.
Sure.
But you are correct in that it's not completely online yet.
So do we have a timeline? I had somebody ask me this.
I don't have a
today.
timeline to brief this evening.
Yeah.
So is our recommendation to the citizens just to have them continue doing as they did in the past? Or like, what are we encouraging them to do?
Yes, to keep on doing it as they've done. So however they were making their payments, I would continue to do it that way. Again, the portal does work. And it works essentially the same way the old payment system did. You still had to type in your name exactly as shown on the bill. So nothing has really changed in that aspect. But like I said, we've got, at this point, I would just continue doing things the way you were doing them or the way that works for you. And we hope shortly it will be up. But we got to get the utility billing live, and then the new portal with the login information, all that stuff will come after that.
It's just a new look of the same arcade stuff.
Yes. It's a new look.
Right now, right now.
Right now,
Won't be,
it still
won't be.
it looks different, but it's essentially sort of the same product. We just had to move from one system to another because the other system was dying, or it died on the end of, at the end of the year.
Which is what we wanted, but
Yes.
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Next up is Human Resources, Kayla.
Evening, Mayor and Council. If you will look on the back of your department details sheet, you will see our employment opportunities. And that is all I have for this evening.
Next up is Engineering and Public Works, Tom Caesar.
The Woodlawn Avenue Slope Failure Project, the DOT's contractor has completed his construction. The road remains closed pending some removal of equipment and some final cleanup that will be done, I'm advised, by the end of this week. Following that, the city will be repairing some of the sidewalk that was damaged during that construction and putting up some safety fencing behind the sidewalk. But other than that, like I said, that project is very nearly completed.
So we'll be able to use the road while you're doing that. The sidewalk and
yes.
fencing, perfect.
Absolutely.
That's awesome.
So yeah, again, by the end of this week, we expect, I'm told that road should be open to the public.
We can get that on, well, JD's in there, social media, and we'll make sure we post that. Awesome, thank you.
And then other than that, the city crews will resume work tomorrow on the Riverfront Greenway, doing some drainage improvements down on the riverfront near Beck Park. Again, that work, we hope to complete that phase of work by the end of this week.
Very good. Great work, thanks, Tom.
Next up is Planning and Development. Tommy Paradise.
Mayor and Council, the Board of Zoning Appeals will meet next Tuesday night, February the 4th. And we also have the Arts MPO Policy Committee meeting on January the 30th. That was rescheduled from last week, but it's no cancellation.
Next is Public Services, James Sutton.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Next week, we're scheduled to take the Skyker Lake Road water tank out of service so that we can get in and do an interior inspection of the structural condition of the tank itself. It's going to take approximately 4 to 5 days to complete the task. During that time, the 5 Notch Road water tank will be supporting the high system on the north side of I-20 in the Sweetwater area. We don't anticipate any problems with customer service during that time, and we'll let Chief and his staff know that this tank will be out of service for fire purposes.
Okay, next up is Public Safety, Chief Johnson.
Good evening. Just to let y'all know, we moved into courts and records, moved into the new building and started operating out of it at the first of the year. And so far, that's been going smoothly. Thank you.
Next up is Parks and Recreation, Rick Meyer.
All right, 3 weeks left of basketball. And with that, we started spring sports registration, if you can believe the word spring after all the snow we've got. But that has started officially today, and you can sign up online. And lastly, the public hearing is Wednesday, 6 o'clock at Riverview Park Activity Center. This is for the Recreation Trails Program grant for the Palmetto Parkway Greenway Trailhead. And we need our public to show up, give us feedback. This is a very competitive grant across the state of South Carolina. And this is one of those functions, along with the resolution, that's very helpful in trying to get this grant.
We don't normally have a public hearing for these grants you've written in the past, have we?
Yes, we do.
Oh,
Yes,
we do?
for recreation trails, we do.
Just for that, for the recreation trails, not for other grants for Parks and Rec.
Yes,
The
for that
specific requires
grant.
that, okay.
Correct.
Yep. Thank you.
Okay, and lastly is Tourism Department, Carl.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Tomorrow night at the Community Center, Aiken County Planning Development is holding a public information session. They're just looking for information from citizens about public feedback about their comprehensive plan exercise they're going through. That's going to be from 6 to 8 o'clock tomorrow evening. Red Cross is hosting a blood drive at Community Center on Wednesday from 11 to 3. You can register through the Red Cross website. It's a pretty painless process. Chamber of Commerce is holding a foundation gala here at Palmetto Terrace on Saturday from 5 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. And proceeds for that go to the Chamber Education and Workforce Development Initiatives. And the evening is coordinated and presented by area high school students. And lastly, we'll be hosting the South Carolina Economic Development Institute next week, February 6th and 7th. We're going to have about 70 visitors from around the state. And folks from anywhere from bankers to government officials go through this class. They meet once a quarter, and this is their first stop of the year to learn about economic development in South Carolina.
And with that, I'll turn that back over to Mr. Clifford.
Well, just as a highlight also for Carl and the Tourism Department, along with all of our departments, North Augusta has been added to a number of the circuits, if you will, of government conferences, and it's great to have the SCETI group that comes here. That's economic developers, because it really highlights the growth here in the western part of South Carolina, and we always get good feedback from these groups when they come to visit. So it gives us a chance to showcase and highlight the benefits of North Augusta, Riverside Village, downtown, and the other economic drivers we have here in the region. So great work by our team to continue to bring them here and then continue to make them want to keep coming back. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over here to Tommy in a minute. What I would tell you is, the council, after we had an offsite almost 2 years ago now, we had a discussion about the growth that we have here within the city, the growth patterns, and we had several discussions about what tools that the city could use to make sure that we manage this growth. And so one of the pieces of guidance that we got from the city council was to study impact fees. So through that, the council passed resolutions to enter into a contract with Tishler Weiss, gave feedback through multiple sessions with that company, and with Carson Weiss is here today. And this is the result of those sessions and the work that he's done, and he's making his presentation to you all for your consideration. And you have the option of adding this to an ordinance as soon as you like, or you can take additional time to consider. But we wanted to make sure at least you had the data and the information from Carson as he came down here from out of state. So, Tommy, unless you had any other commentary you wanted to add? All right, then I'll turn it over to Carson.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Carson Weiss with Tishler Weiss. It's nice to be in front of you again. Next slide. A little bit about us, as you may remember from last February when we were here, we do specialize in impact fees and fiscal and economic impact analysis, as well as infrastructure financing strategies, and we've done more of that type of work in South Carolina than any other firm. Next slide.
Carson, if you don't mind, you're real tall, and if you don't, just going to hurt your back, but if you could just make sure you speak in I want everybody, the thousands of people who watch this every Monday, I want to make sure that they get that.
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So if you recall from our work session we had in February, there are basically three prongs of a legal test that we need to meet with impact fees. And the first is we have to establish need or nexus, and that is that we have to document that the city's growing, and that growth is going to necessitate the need for additional infrastructure. Then we also have to show benefit, and we show benefit two ways. One is through the timing of expenditures, and the second is geographic. And North Augusta is a small enough community that we really don't have to get into service areas. You guys are providing services on a citywide basis, and so generally it's a citywide service area for all the impact fees. And then we also have to show proportionality, and that's where you'll see in the presentation that we differentiate residential impact fees by type of housing unit, and we differentiate non-residential fees by type of non-residential development, because they all have different indicators of demand. It's also important to note that, as we talked about in February, we can't use impact fees for operations and maintenance, and we do have to utilize these for growth-related infrastructure only. Next slide. So we also talked in February about sort of the methods we have to calculate impact fees, and the way to think about that is to look to the past, the present, and the future. When we look to the past, that's where we have oversized facilities, and new growth is going to buy into that excess capacity that we have. We use that a lot for utilities, and in fact, we're using that for utilities here in North Augusta. There's also what we call the consumption-based or the incremental expansion method. And that's a very formulaic approach where we document levels of service in the community. There's no judgment in terms of whether that level of service is adequate, inadequate. It doesn't matter. That's what's been funded today. And so there, by definition, there is no existing deficiency, because it is what you have in the ground today. And we basically then document, for instance, how many square feet you have per capita, or how many acres you have per capita for like Parks and Rec. What does it cost us to buy an acre? What does it cost us to improve an acre of land, et cetera? And we calculate the fee that way. And then the final method is we look to the future. Usually we want you to have an adopted master plan that has a funding component to it. It can generate higher impact fees, but there is some exposure to the general fund, which is why we almost default to the consumption-based approach, because what happens with a plan-based approach is if we have a CIP, let's just say it's $50 million, and we're counting on $40 million in impact fees, but there's a recession, we still have to build the $50 million CIP, but now we have to come up with money from other sources. And so with that consumption-based approach, there's more, there's less exposure to the general fund. We only have to build to the level of which we collected in terms of impact fees.
So the consumption approach is incremental expansion.
Yes. Next slide, please. Impact fees in South Carolina. If you recall, in February, I did mention that there were at current, I think there's 29 different impact fee acts across the country that govern impact fees. South Carolina is one of those. There are a few quirks to your act, but generally it's the same as as most acts. One is that you have to maintain revenue in an interest-bearing account and do an annual report. That's pretty standard. South Carolina is very specific in terms of how soon you have to spend the money. Many impact fee acts give you 10 years or 7 years to spend money. South Carolina is a little different. It simply says you have to spend the money within 3 years of the scheduled date of construction. So that doesn't mean that if I pay an impact fee tomorrow, you've got 3 years to spend the money. What it means is if we have in the CIP that it's anticipated that you build, for instance, a new park in 2027, we have to spend that money by 2030. Okay, so that's what that means. The other interesting quirk to the South Carolina Impact Fee Act is it does require an analysis on the effect of the impact fees on the availability of affordable housing within the city. Act is moot on how that has to be done, whether there needs to be amelioration. If you exceed certain percentages, it just says that we have to do this analysis, and we've included that in the draft impact fee report for the city. Next slide. If you may also recall from February that we also have to guard against new development paying twice, and that's why we have to give credits if needed within the methodology. Let's focus on the two at the bottom, debt service and dedicated revenue. If the city has existing debt service, it's very likely that we would have to give a credit because I'm going to pay you an impact fee, but I'm also going to pay property or sales tax that could go to retire the same type of infrastructure I paid the impact fee for. Also, when a community has dedicated revenues, whether it's a property tax or sales tax that's dedicated to a specific infrastructure, like for instance, we've done several road impact fees in South Carolina, for instance, York County, that has a dedicated transportation sales tax. It's very likely in those cases that if we're going to use impact fees for the same roads that we're going to improve with the sales tax dollars, we have to give a credit in the methodology so that we're not paying twice. The second type of credit is addressed in the ordinance, and I think that's our responsibility as part of this contract is to draft an ordinance. And what that means is that if I'm a developer and I come through the door and we've got a park impact fee in place and I'm donating or dedicating land to the city for which is included in the impact fee calculation, we have to work out some sort of a developer agreement where I'm made whole, because otherwise my development's going to pay twice, once through the impact fees and again through the fact that we dedicated land for parks. Next slide, please. So in terms of the impact fees that we looked at as part of this evaluation, it included your utilities, water and wastewater, parks and recreation, which you may remember was added to our contract in September or October of this year, and then transportation as well as sanitation. Next slide. So as first part of the first thing we do as part of the analysis is, we talk to staff to determine levels of service, get inventories of infrastructure, et cetera, but we also have to make a projection of what your future development looks like from a residential and a non-residential perspective. And so what we did here is we projected population, housing units, employment, and non-residential floor area. The residential projections are based on past trends. I believe the non-residential increases are based on MPO data. We're projecting an increase of almost 2,560 new housing units over the next 10 years, and that equates to approximately 5,000 additional persons. From a non-residential perspective, we're projecting an increase of about 770,000 square feet of additional non-residential space. What that means in additional jobs is about 1,866 new jobs. Now, it is important to note that because of the approach that we've taken for all fees except transportation, the development projections have no impact on the amount of the fees. Okay, we're not using this projection of population, the projection of housing units, et cetera, to determine the fee amounts with the exception of transportation. So what that means is if the projection, or if it's higher or lower, it doesn't change the fee amounts. It's just done strictly as part of that establishing the nexus that the city of North Augusta is going to grow, and to the best of our knowledge and the data that's available, this is what the projection is.
Okay, I'm glad you said that because I think those numbers are a little low.
Yeah, they are.
Be in 10 years.
We would rather be conservative than.
Yeah, but that really does not come into play as far as whether it ended up being 40,000 or 31. Like you said, that's not driving the fee.
Exactly.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Those were my questions.
Yes. Next slide, please. So let's turn our attention to Parks and Recreation. We're proposing a citywide service area. There are two components to this fee. One is the acquisition of additional parkland. The second is the construction of additional improvements and amenities on either existing city parks or future parkland that you buy. It doesn't matter as long as you're improving parks. The costs are allocated 100% to residential development. The 10-year demand based on your existing levels of service and the development projection we just discussed, we're projecting that demand will be for about 31 additional acres over the next 10 years. And at the current cost per acre that we're utilizing, that's about $790,000 of additional parkland acquisition. Over that same 10-year period, we're estimating that you'd have to make about $3 million in additional park improvements to either existing parks or future acreage that you do buy. Next slide, please. This slide shows the draft impact fees. The proposed fee for a single-family resident is $1,607. The proposed fee for a multifamily unit is $910. Next slide. So what we've done here is we've applied those draft impact fees to the development projections. And so over the next 10 years, we're projecting that demand for park infrastructure would be almost $3.8 million. And because we use that consumption-based approach, the revenue approximates or equals that growth-related expenditure.
Let me, mind if I ask you another question?
Sure, yeah.
So this is, all right, so you talked about the park say you use park improvements. So if this is the direction we go, it's going to be based off of new development, but because those new people, that new development, whatever, may end up using our existing parks, or maybe the development needs a new park, all that's included. So it's not as if these dollars have to be used specifically for a particular project. It's the city as a whole.
Exactly.
In all aspects.
Exactly.
In each of these. Okay.
Exactly. And I should also point out, because I'm assuming this will probably come up during question and answer, it usually does, is like most communities we work with, over the next 10 years, you'll probably spend more than $3.7 million on parks, right? Some of that will be infrastructure replacement, but some of it may be as new residents move to North Augusta, they're demanding higher levels of service. So you may end up spending $6 or $7 million on park infrastructure over the next 10 years. It's just that new growth is only going to generate about $3.8 million of that, right? So any expenditure above and beyond that is elevating your existing level of service. Now, obviously, in 5 years' time, when you update the impact fees, that new level of service will be part of that new calculation.
Okay, very good.
Next slide, please. Next impact fee is sanitation, citywide service area. We did a consumption-based approach for vehicles. One of the caveats or one of the things that's required in the South Carolina Impact Fee Act, infrastructure has to have a value of over 100K, and so there are some pieces of equipment or vehicles that don't meet that threshold and aren't included in this fee. Because you are only providing sanitation services to residential development, it is allocated 100% to that demand base. And over the next 10 years, we're projecting that there'd be demand for about $455,000 worth of additional vehicles and equipment. Next slide, please. And so that equates to an impact fee of $193 per single family unit and $109 per multifamily unit. Next slide. And so over the next 10 years, projected fee revenue would approximate those expenditures. And so again, there's no share that we have to make up from the general fund for existing development. Next slide, please. Transportation, a little different. We did a plan-based approach because of the data limitations we had. It is a citywide service area. The components are vehicles. Sorry for the error there. It's vehicle and equipment for transportation. And then improvements, road improvements from the ARTS draft master transportation plan, and costs are allocated to total vehicle trips in 2034, which I'll illustrate here in a second. Next slide. So this is transportation CIP. This is a plan-based approach versus that consumption-based or incremental expansion approach. So because we don't have a transportation model that shows us what the growth-related portion of each of these road improvements are, we sort of have to take a conservative approach and allocate these costs to all development. So what we've done is we've taken the CIP, which totals about 51.7 million. We have allocated that over total projected trips in 2020 or 2034. So that means the existing development, or a portion of the CIP is attributable to existing development, and a portion is attributable to new development. And so that's how we get our cost per trip. Next slide. And so that equals a draft impact fee for a single family unit of about $2,802, for a multifamily unit, $997. And then when we move to the non-residential side, retail development, commercial development, since they do have higher trip generation rates than office and industrial, it has the highest fee per 1,000 square feet at $4,699, followed by office and other services at $2,085, and then $1,367 for institutional uses per 1,000 square feet. And then industrial has the lowest fee per 1,000 square feet at $914. Next slide. So this illustrates the difference between a consumption-based approach and a plan-based approach. You can see here that our total expenditure is $51.8 million. The amount of that expenditure that's attributable to new growth is about $8.8 million. So we're going to have to come up with, if we adopt these fees at this amount, the city is going to have to come up with $43 million of revenue from other sources in order to fund this CIP. Next slide, please. So the next two fees, water and wastewater, are done using that buy-in or cost recovery approach. The fees would be assessed through the water service area. The fee component is the city's investment in your water infrastructure to date. Next slide. So we have an investment in the water treatment plant of $25.9 million. It has a capacity of 12 million gallons a day, and so that's how we get our cost per gallon of capacity. Next slide. And so that treatment cost per gallon is then applied to the average gallons a day consumption for a residential unit, or single family unit. A single family unit has a 3/4 inch meter size. We then use capacity ratios from the American Waterworks Association to calibrate that single family demand to the different meter sizes. And so you can see here a fee would range from $406 for a 3/4 inch meter all the way up to $71,811 for your largest 12 inch meter. Next slide. Wastewater, same way. The buy-in component is for your share of the investment into the Aiken County Public Service Authority wastewater treatment plant investment that you've made to date. Next slide. And that that investment has been $6.5 million. Your allocated capacity right now is about almost 8.7 million gallons, and that's how we get our cost per gallon. Next slide. And so we have a very low fee here, ranging from $109 for a 3/4 inch meter all the way to $19,271 for a 12 inch meter. And then what does that mean in terms of full freight on different land uses once we add all these fees together? The top part of the table shows what I'll refer to as the general fund infrastructure categories of parks, transportation, and sanitation. A single family unit would pay $4,602 plus an additional $516 in utilities, so it's about a $5,100 impact fee. Multifamily unit would pay $2,016 for the general fund, and then another fee on top of that, probably the $516 there. And then our industrial fees would be $914 plus whatever meter size that they were allocated. Same with commercial, $46.99 plus whatever meter. Office, $2,085 per 1,000 square feet, and whatever meter size they would be allocated. And the same with institutional, $1,367 per 1,000 plus whatever meter size. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, I do. Yeah, you do this all the time, so I'll ask you some questions. Okay, you mentioned about, give me an example on the transportation. You said you had sanitation vehicles, but you said it's vehicles or equipment for transportation. what would be, give me an example of what that looks like.
Bulldozers, scrapers, those kind of things.
So, all right. So not that we have this all the time, but that theoretically could be used for, if we ended up having a lot of snow, you could, some vehicle for putting down. Okay. All right. That's one thing. And Claire, explain this, because you said this kind of fast. You said on number 18 that under transportation, the projected contribution of new growth was going to be about 8.8 million. But you saw the total expenditures of 51, and the 51 million, you got that from the arts.
Can we go back to that slide, please?
So that's the arts page, but you're saying that if we did transportation, if, let's just say again, we generate in the next 10 years, this 8.8, are you saying we are not able to use that 8.8 unless we come up with the difference between the 851 and the 8?
So yes, so
Okay.
with a plan-based approach,
Okay.
if you adopt the impact fees as drafted, you've committed yourself to build a 51.8 million CIP.
Okay.
Whether the impact fee revenue is there or not.
For the plan-based. Okay, good. That's good clarification. Okay, that's what I was wondering. So, what happens in communities that do that and that doesn't happen?
Can you clarify? They don't build it, or
Yeah,
the
let's
impact
say
fee?
whatever they can't come up with that difference in the general budget at some point.
Yeah.
What
So
literally happens?
then, I mean, I'm not an attorney, but I have experience with this. If you collect the fee, I mean, essentially, by adopting a fee, the way to think of it is you've entered into a contract with the development community. You're going to provide infrastructure at a certain level. And so if you commit to a plan-based approach for transportation and for whatever reason you don't build 51.8 million in infrastructure, you're vulnerable to challenge or refunds.
Okay. You talk a lot about credit, but I don't you see the word credit on any of these slides. You have a fee. So help me understand what that looks like.
Right. So right now you don't have any existing debt on any of the infrastructure
Right.
categories that we've looked at,
Right.
and you don't have any dedicated taxes that for instance, are going strictly to roads or strictly to
Right.
parks or something like that. So we don't have to give a credit for future streams of revenue.
Okay. No credit for future streams.
Yeah.
Okay. Very good. All right, last question I have. So under the last page in the impact fee summary, is your recommendation, you did 5, but you highlighted as parks, transportation, sanitation. Are you saying that's the recommendation that you have? Because I don't see the other ones.
No,
in
water
there.
and wastewater at the bottom table because they're by meter.
Oh, there. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, it's hard to it's kind of apples to oranges because you're doing it per unit for residential and per 1,000 square feet for non-residential, but for utilities, it's all based on meter sizes.
And because we asked you to do all 5 of these categories, it will still be up to us to determine what of those that we want to do.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. So the plan plan base pretty much tells us that to me, that looks like a commitment if we want to do these projects. And then because the other areas don't really tie in with anything, I mean, that's where we're going, there's no credit involved there. So, okay. Those are my initial questions. So open it up. Kevin, you go next.
Yeah, just a couple of probably things that were covered, but I was trying to drink from the fire hose as you were talking. So a developer comes to us, they want to, let's talk about the development potentially that we spoke about tonight. That's potentially 1,800-ish units. At what point does the impact fee get paid? I guess that's my first question. When do we collect that?
Yeah, and that'll be spelled out in the ordinance, but 95% of the communities in the country collect it at time of building permit.
So the developer is going to pay that out of pocket through the proceeds of their construction up front and then recoup it in addition. And
we're all impact fee consultants are guilty of just using the term developer. It's whoever pulls the building permit, which a lot of times is the home builder, which may not be the developer.
Right. Yeah. Whoever's actually responsible for constructing the vertical construction of that that particular house. On the multifamily, just for clarifications, when you talk about per unit, is that per individual door?
Yes, so you may
Okay.
have a building that has 20 different units, so they'll pay 20 impact fees.
Okay, so a 300 unit apartment complex would have 300 times $2,016 would be their impact fee up front. I think that's for now. Those are my questions.
Well, you answered one about when it's collected. But are these numbers set in stone? I mean, $4,600 for a single family. I mean,
When
you got a neighborhood of.
When you mean set in stone, what it means is we can't justify you going higher.
No, I'm talking about.
Okay, and I've had that happen. As somebody said, I think the school impact fee should be 10,000, not 8,000, right?
No, but it could be
you don't
2,000.
have to adopt this. You can adopt 50% or whatever percentage it is, right?
Yeah.
But just keep in mind that by adopting a percentage of the fee doesn't negate you having to fund 100% of the infrastructure.
Okay. I guess just one of my concerns is, and I know we talked about impact fees, just the price of homes keep going up and up and up, and tack on another $5,000. I mean, I'm pretty sure the builder's going to pass the $5,000 on to the homeowner.
Let me ask you this,
That's
piggyback
just my
off
2
David's
cents.
question. And I'm sure every community is different sizes, but because we've never looked at this, is there a way, I mean, where are we? I mean, are these, if I went out and talked to other municipalities, which I have not, and of course, I would assume Greenville, because their size, maybe you look at different than North Augusta, but are we, I mean, I don't have a range. I mean, are we
good
like
question.
far in of high compared? Are we real low? I mean, where are we? How do we look at, how do we make that decision?
You stole my question.
And I, that's my fault. Normally I would have included that in this presentation because at this point we're actually considering it and it's not a work session. Once we get the final fees is where we usually put it in. But so we will have it in the next presentation, but you would be on the low end.
Okay, yeah, that was part of my question with it. If there's a city our size that has implemented impact fees, have they implemented them all? Are there a certain category that they, or that just varies?
That varies, yes, ma'am.
I mean, David, to your point, I mean, what I'm hearing, when I haven't asked dollars when I talk to other mayors and other communities, but I mean, the bottom line is with the growth that's going to be happening in this city, I mean, it's almost to the point, unfortunately, to development in most communities, it's the cost of doing business. And, and a lot of communities, they're glad to pay it because what it is now versus what it could go up.
And what we'll do is over the next few days, we'll add a slide to the end of this presentation that has your proposed fees compared to other jurisdictions in South Carolina, and I'll mail it to Tommy and Jim, and they can circulate it to you guys, just so you'll have it well in advance of the next get-together.
One thing I was thinking about, Pat, when I look at the transportation, because, and this is the transportation one I really like, and that's where, I don't know, the conversation of trying to make that gap, but we probably get asked a ton, I know 30 years you've been on council, about about widening, 5-notch road, okay? And I'm sitting there going, wow, here's an avenue to help us go from 2 to 4 lanes. But does it make sense when we're going to have to figure out a way to come up with another 43 million.
The catch-22 though is if we don't, then the services and the infrastructure stays the same, and then eventually it deteriorates, and then we have a problem.
The parks though makes sense. That's
You said that all kind of matched up with the project with MTP 2050 MTP.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
This is good.
I may have missed it and you might have covered it, but is there any difference between a 2,000 square foot single family and a 4,000 square foot single family? Or are they all just put in with the same?
That's a great question. And sorry, I was looking for the housing affordability analysis that we did. I was going to chime in on that. Yes, but that's an option, and it's not too late for us to pursue that. This is what we call a one-size-fits-all residential fee structure, where all single-family units pay the same, all multifamily units pay the same. In more progressive communities, we have done what we call a progressive fee schedule, where it is based on the size of house, and we don't distinguish between single-family and multifamily. And I wouldn't expect there to be anything off here. Like sometimes in Florida when we do this, because of the demographics, because you've got, let's say, an elderly population, we don't see that correlation. But in most communities we work in, there is a direct relationship between the size of the housing unit, the number of people that reside in it, the number of vehicles available, which influence the trip generation rates. And so we do the fees by size of home, and then in most communities, there's a leveling off where that relationship no longer holds true. And whether that's at 3,500 square feet or 5,000 square feet, that just varies from community to community. That is something that we could do and bring to you as an option. I mean, proponents of it, and I happen to be one of them, it helps with housing affordability, helps with housing equity goals. So it's something, that a lot of communities consider.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful besides the information you said you thought, you didn't put in here because that you normally put when you get down the line a little bit farther as far as where we rank. I think getting an idea of some communities specifically that have used one size fits all, and that would help me know in South Carolina. Give me, is there one or two communities that have done the progressive fee schedule? I think that's good. I think that's good information for us.
And I just wanted to chime in on something about the effect of the impact fee on housing affordability. At the proposed fees right now at a 6% interest rate is $31 on a typical mortgage. If it was at 7%, it's $34. Just to give you a order of magnitude.
Well, this might be a goofy question, but if we pass this, does that affect the developers? We don't want to go to North Augusta. The impact fees, will that affect people not wanting to build, the developers and all? No, I mean, it'll help us, correct?
I mean, it could help, it may impact some, but I mean, if you have a great community of quality of life and people are moving here, then I believe there's going to be enough people who say, I can still include that as a fee and be profitable. But yeah,
Because like David or Kevin said, that fee will be thrown over to the homeowner.
Well, I don't, I guess you said, yeah. Well, same thing as if we got to raise a millage.
You haven't done that.
Yeah, so I don't know. I think, as far as the one that's easy to me, that I love the parks, because that is a quality of life, no matter whether you're a new person coming here or not. I mean, that's something that's an easy one.
So we choose which we want: park and recreation, sanitation, transportation. That's what we would choose.
All right. Any other questions while we got them? We can get them back. This is good.
Well, thank you for the homework assignment. We will report back within the week with a comparison of proposed fees to other fees in South Carolina, and we will also give you a list of our clients that have done the progressive fee structure versus the non-progressive fee structure.
We're not voting on this, but I would just tell you, my personal opinion, I don't see myself ready to move forward with this. I'd like to get that information and maybe get you back for another study session. If you don't, Jim.
Agreed.
So I can't see as far as impact fee. For me, I'm not ready to move forward on this. I think we probably need to get that information, have another one, maybe another study session, maybe with us, maybe with him coming back. But anyway, I think we're much closer. I feel a lot more knowledgeable and have a better feel today than even after your initial one. I think one more would be helpful for me. Y'all good with that?
Yes, I
Yeah,
agree.
yeah.
One more thing.
Yeah.
These places you put up here, they already have the impact fee, all of these?
Not every one of those clients have chosen to adopt. Most of them have.
But you said earlier too that, like you said, Britton, or Mayor Williams, where little North Augusta stands amongst everybody, you know, so, I mean, look at Horry County.
Yeah, you'll get on it.
Compared to us. Good gracious.
We're good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.
Next up, Tommy Paradise. I'm going to have Tommy brief here from the desk, if that's okay.
Mr. Mayor and Council, this is talking about moratorium for apartments and multifamilies in the city of North Augusta. We talked about it before the hurricane, so this is just another update. And you see how the skyrocketing population in North Augusta is going from 2000 to 2020. Next slide. First thing are our goals misaligned. In the current comprehensive plan, it calls for us to incentivize a variety of housing type at higher densities, including multifamily, courtyards, apartments, and so forth. So that is one of the things that if we want to get away from encouraging apartments, we would need to amend our comprehensive plan. Next slide, please, sir. So right now, we updated our records last week for a couple of reasons, and this was one. Right now, we've got 63 projects overall in the pipeline somewhere from the initial submittal to the final plat. 11 apartments with 2,883 units. We've got 18 single-family attached with 1,100 units and 16 single-family detached projects with 5,773 units and 2 duplexes with 111 units. This just gives you an idea of owner-occupied compared to non-owner-occupied, where it is in the city. Next slide. About 2/3 of our homes are owner-occupied and 1/3 are rentals. Next slide. So what do we want to do? If council feels like the apartments are too prevalent, how do we restrain or restrict their future growth? And one of them is a moratorium, and then that gives you time enough to amend the comprehensive plan and revise the zoning ordinance. The moratorium, this is a case from Minnesota. To do a moratorium, it's got to be for the purpose of researching and implementing changes to the zoning ordinance or comprehensive plan, or both. It's limited in duration, and the government has to act promptly to research and implement such changes. You can't just say we don't want them. I've got 3 case studies here. We've looked at them before, but the common issues in all of them is they have rapidly increasing population. There's a immense demand for public services and infrastructure, risk to health, safety, and welfare for residents, and the impact that it has on your traditional neighborhoods and quality of life. Next one. So Clemson had a temporary moratorium on housing developments of 200 bedrooms or more in order to provide council time to address the issue. Next one. And basically, it was from 180 calendar days from the effective date, and then it could extend that for 90 days. But go ahead to the next one. And in Port Royal, the town population increased 33% from 2010 to 2020. Population increased 9.9% from 2020 to 2022. So they did a moratorium on on the certificates of compliance, building permits, design review approvals, site for a period of 1 year for multifamily developments, so that they could kind of get it in order. And it studied the extent that multifamily developments are permitted, the long-term effects on the town's neighborhoods, appropriate amendments to development codes, and where it might have been necessary to enact new regulations for multifamily. And in Mount Pleasant, that's probably the most famous of the moratoriums for apartments. They had a 2-year period studied and developed and implemented a new comprehensive plan, and that was adopted by council and effective on October 13th, 2020. Next one. And the comprehensive plan addresses multifamily structures, and the purpose was to give the town time to amend the zoning ordinance. And they've initiated a rewrite to the zoning for development code. So if you want to do this, what is our steps forward? One is zoning ordinance amendments. These are all the different zoning districts in the city where they're conditionally allowed. Now, when you say conditionally allowed, basically they're allowed by right as long as you meet these conditions. They don't have to go to a board. They don't have to get a, this is the site plan, it meets it, and you're good to go. So, that's a large part of our community. Next slide. There's 1,415 parcels where multifamily is allowed in the city. And I just took R5 because that's, whenever I think of apartments, that's what I think of most is R5. But as you notice, you've got all those other districts. Right now, there's 25 parcels that's open for development in the R5. One of those is really large enough for an apartment complex. Next one. So, if you were to want to go forward with a moratorium, I would suggest that you exempt existing and ongoing planned developments with vested rights. Basically, these are planned PDs that's been approved by and they have the apartments in their general development plans. Projects that have acquired vested rights, those are those that we've already approved and said you can build. And then this is one, accessory apartments be allowed for an owner-occupied single-family parcel for the occupancy of a family member. And remember, our development code allows accessory apartments. And you may not realize it, but I get a lot of calls from property owners that want to buy this piece of property and not live there, but rent it. And they want to build another accessory apartment that they can rent out too, so they can have 2 rental units on a single-family residential parcel. And right now in our development code, that is allowed. Comprehensive plan was adopted in 2017. We updated it in 2022, and it's due for a rewrite in 27. So basically, staff, what is the guidance, path forward that you want us to take? And that's what we'll do. And that was kind of the speed PowerPoint.
Okay. Well, I got some questions for you. The slide when you said multifamily conditionally allowed and you list R5, OC, NC, that list there.
Correct.
The next slide, you say there are 1,415 parcels that allow multifamily right now. That's including the conditional?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. So basically, and whether it's conditional or not, it's all, that 1,415 right now has multifamily allows.
Correct.
Okay. All right. So a couple thoughts. One, I personally think our comprehensive plan, we are incentivizing apartments with the way it's written now. And the question is, if Mount Pleasant went 2 years and we have a comprehensive plan review in August of 2027, legally, if we decide to do a 2.5-year moratorium, because if the comprehensive plan rewrites in August of 2027, we don't necessarily start August of 2027.
Well,
that's right.
I think what I can tell you is, I think the Mount Pleasant's been 7 years now, I think's what it's been.
I know we
Yeah,
used 1 year
Yeah.
last edition. What I'm saying, we aren't hung up on that. I'm saying if we decided to go longer than a year, it would make sense. We could justify because we got to rewrite the comprehensive plan in 2027.
There are no hard and fast rules in South Carolina on doing it. We haven't had a case that done it or anything of that nature. The recommendations are you really need to put a time limit on it, and it needs to be reasonably associated with what you say you're doing to hold off for it.
Okay.
No, and you know, Mount Pleasant, I don't think has been contested on it at all, and they are now talking about doing away with it.
If we say 1 year, how hard is it to extend it if we got to that point? Or is it better to kind of?
It's however we do the ordinance. I mean, I think whenever we do it, you may set it for a period of time with a specific provision in the ordinance that allows you to extend that for some additional time.
And I do agree with you, Mayor Williams, on if we're already doing the comprehensive plan, and I'm assuming pre-planning happens before that and things like that, so that would be about 2 years.
And Tommy, you and I have talked a little bit. Do you kind of agree with that?
Yes, sir.
Procedure?
Yes, sir.
All right, Tommy, the 11 projects in the pipeline are all 11 apartments that you have here, 11 apartments with 2,883 units you list on this page. Are those all standalone or are those in mixed use developments?
Some are standalone and some are mixed use. Okay. The majority, I would think, are in mixed use.
In mixed use.
Remember, Validate has 3 right there.
Okay. Those are my initial
All right.
questions I had.
My question, I'm still concerned about property owners, their land. I mean, I know you said people buy land and not even here. I mean, how can we do people that way? I don't quite understand that. I mean, I owned a big tract somewhere, and in my head 10 years ago, that's what I was going to do. But I mean, it looks like we're telling you you can't do that. I mean, then what would the people do with their land? Just let it sit there?
That would be a business decision.
Huh.
That would be a business decision for them.
Well, I think that's why the recommendation is you do it for a specific period of time.
Yeah.
You're not saying we're not going to ever let you build apartments, but we're saying we need to get a better control on how we're doing it.
Yeah. But we can like do it for a year and then go back and change it. I mean, is that, you can do that? It doesn't have to be a set number of years that we do it. And I know some of the concerns in North Augusta are, we want to keep us a one high school town. And they just afraid we don't overgrow that, you know, and that's a big thing. And
But Pat, to me, what strikes me is my wake-up call, not wake up, I shouldn't say that. The thing that struck me of why we need to consider this is that the apartment complex, Tommy, I can't even what it is out there by Quick Trip. Okay. You had a willing buyer, a willing seller, and what they did fit our code because we incentivized that. So now we have an apartment complex that there's not a single one of us or anybody in the city can do anything about. And what we know, I put my city administrator hat on and Chief Johnson hat, but apartments over time become liabilities often because of just the structure themselves, and it goes down in the amount of effort. So apartments take a lot of manpower from our city. Is that correct? Is that a valid statement, Chief and Jim? It's an expensive proposition for the city is what I'm saying.
So there are pros and cons to having mixed use. The cons, as you allocated to, is the fact that you do have a higher concentration of people in a smaller space, so you have a higher density of public safety calls to those locations. You also have a larger impact on our utilities. So our water and wastewater in a much smaller space with a large number of clients, citizens living there, have an impact. So as we look at infrastructure, concerns as we're talking about today with the Kellogg tract. When you put an apartment complex in there, that puts a larger burden on our infrastructure, both water and wastewater, for going forward, and that competes against other things you may want to do in the city to include commercial and other residential options.
But how do we help people, everybody have somewhere to live? Or, I've been watching on TV, Augusta, about all the homelessness. That's just a matter of time. It's coming over here. But see, that just bothers me about people that everybody in this city cannot live down in Hammond's Ferry. They cannot. Or Hammond Hill or the Rapids. But I don't want where we can just almost sometimes, and I do understand what everybody's saying with apartments, because it is, but it's almost like we want to choose who lives in our city. I'm sorry on that.
But I think the assumption you're making are that apartments are a less expensive place to live, and they're not.
No, they're not. I can tell you that right now, but I don't know. And I think we do need to control it, because that is a talk of the town, about apartments. But I just do not want somebody to never have. And like I said, I asked Jim and Jamie this today when I was visiting them. Do we know, like the thing you gave us was all the apartments, like how many in that complex is rented out? Are they full to the max, these apartment complexes? Or, because, like I said, I talked to some little girls at Riverview Park that were nursing students.
I think our numbers, Tom, at one point there, in the citywide are in over 90%. They're occupied.
They what, occupy? Well, does that say we don't need them? If they all occupy, I don't know.
We're two different things, Pat. We have been, I have to look at our voting record. Our voting record is not that we've been against apartments. We like them in mixed use. Okay? Because with mixed use, you have residential, you have attached, you have different types. What my concern is, do we want to have, because we have land, just rampant apartments that they're saying that's what that happened at Q-Trip. We have no control over that. And that is a concern for me.
Well,
in the next 10 years.
Yeah, and that is, I think, the way the comprehensive plan is written currently is kind of it's an encouragement. So it's kind of come one, come all. Developers are seeing that, and they're seeing that it's an easy way to get into the city to be able to develop that. So I think it's the future concern of
I could
the amount.
If we did it a year at a time, and then come back and say, wait a minute, this is, because Mount Pleasant, I didn't go on that field trip, but Mayor Jones, I don't know if it went to Mount Pleasant what's the place down there that, like Hammond's Ferry? Eon. That's who we copied. Eon, right here in Hammond's Ferry. And of course, same thing. Look, everybody wants to come. They might not can live there, but it's very nice.
But Pat, remember, it's not just a matter of us saying, it's just not as simple as saying we're going to do an ordinance and we don't have to do anything for a year. The ordinance is to give us time. Tommy and the Planning Commission, they have to go back and rewrite our development code. Yeah. So I'm saying a year makes no sense to me, because we're putting more pressure, more effort for a year, when in 18 months after a year, in 2.5 years, they've got to do it anyway. So if Kelly says we're not limited to a year, if we decide to go this route, I would be in favor of at least a 2.5 year or whatever time frame. That gives Tommy and the Planning Commission ample time while they're doing the work of the normal 5-year rewrite to address it. And that gives more public input and things of that nature. That's just me.
I'd like to have it longer, 2 years, and then relook at it.
Well, 2 years, I could go with that, but my heart's leaning 2 different ways.
But Pat,
a lot in the pipeline right now.
But Pat, your concern is more of a social issue. That's not what we are. That's not this body. We aren't set up. This city's not set up to literally do what
that is a wonderful point, but I'm just saying, there's not a community in this country that has figured it out, thus the homelessness problem. It's just, we just aren't set up. I mean, yeah, we just aren't set up to do that.
What I'd like Chief
I just don't know how to
Johnson
do
over
that.
there to do for me, and this is for my I would like, if you can have a record of how many calls you go to apartment complexes, how many fights are at North Augusta High School that you have been called to come in beside the 2 resource officers.
And for the purposes of correction things, I think it was eons ago that we went down there, but it was Ion. But Ion is the name. Yeah.
But again, we're not talking about Hammond's Fair. We're not talking about Ion. We're talking about land of a willing buyer seller who can just build apartment complexes. And our code, that's what I'm saying is, what we're seeing with what Tommy's done with the Planning Commission that we've done for the last year is we rewrote the development code since 2007. I think the city made a lot of progress doing that. But what we have seen, even since we voted on it 18 months ago, is Tommy and the Planning Commission are realize, hey, there's some little bells and whistles, some tweaks that we need to fix that we didn't think about. And now that we're looking at apartments, I think what it's telling us is our current code it's not where we want to go in the next 10 years when it comes to standalone apartments.
So, Mr. Mayor, as part of this, as a study session, really what we're trying to get as a staff is guidance from the council. So ultimately, the staff is prepared to have an ordinance ready for review as early as next week for the council meeting. That can be for a 1-year term. It can be for a term of over 2 years to line up with the comprehensive plan. Again, I like to do event, not time-based. So the next planned and scheduled development item for us really is that comprehensive plan in 2027.
August 2020. I would be open to an ordinance that uses that date as our timeline.
So if that's, I guess what I need is consensus from.
That's my opinion.
I'll agree, yes.
And up with the rewrite.
But one more question.
Kevin, you got a question?
Well, I was just gonna say, I concur with the 2.5 years. I think that makes sense. But are we also saying carte blanche all multifamily projects from duplexes to large apartment complexes? Are we gonna put like Clemson did to say only complexes over? Are we gonna make any differentiation on what we mean and specify that in this ordinance? Or are we just saying anything other than a single family residential is off the cart for 2.5 years? I just want some clarification on kind of what the path forward there is.
Yeah, that's a good question. We haven't talked about it.
We gotta talk about that. My concern was about the standalone unit.
Yeah, that was my
big part, because you have the density that we're trying to create in the planned developments. I mean, that's
the
what we're trying
piece
to
for
do.
me.
The larger,
What I would call River Falls.
Yeah, and that's what I'm thinking of as well. I just want to make sure that we don't take a chainsaw to, that we're specific in what we're doing.
All that. I use the word standalone. I don't know.
Well, and I need to get it into parameters some way, but I'm sorry.
Oh, no, you go ahead and finish.
Go ahead, Pat. Sorry.
No, I was letting Tommy finish what he said.
Right now, I've got a draft kind of worded, and it includes duplexes, triplexes, quadruplexes, everything that's more than a single family residence. Now, if y'all don't want that, I can take out duplexes. I can take out triplexes. Just tell me what you want in there, and I can change the ordinance.
Give me an example of, just my brain, give me an example of the duplex issue. You said that you have that in there as a rough draft. Okay. Give me an example what that would impact. Give me an example now that would have impacted if we had it.
Well, what I was trying
falls under that duplex.
2 dwelling units on the same parcel.
No, I know, but do we have any project that is like that right now?
We do have one that's being built off of Old Edgefield Road. I think they've been clearing it forever. And then that's where you see the trees and bushes, the trees knocked down over there in the bulldozers. That's what's supposed to go in there. And I'm meeting with a fellow later this week about another duplex project that's in a planned development.
So Kevin, so give me your thoughts as far as what do you see as far as the duplexes and outside, what I call the standalone, yay or nay? What do you see?
Yeah, I mean, well, the way I'm kind of going in Pat's direction a little bit and not discounting what you said about us being limited in how we handle social services and all of that. But I do think when you look at housing in general, there is the missing middle that they consistently talk about is the fact that the overly restrictive zoning that a lot of municipalities do prohibit what can be more affordable housing like duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes that don't have the density, as much of a density impact as a large, like you said, standalone 300-unit apartment complex would. So I would be hesitant to cut those out because I do think if you limit it to single family, even though we're only talking 2.5 years, we don't really have anything major proposed. So I don't know that there's any real impact there. I would just like us to at least have that conversation and make sure we're very intentional if we're going to eliminate it at all, but we understand what the impact of that is.
Two questions. So there's two properties I'm thinking of. I don't know what they fall under. The older gentleman that did both of those, there's a handful of units right there by the post office. Okay, are those condos?
I think they are.
Okay,
but I'm not for sure.
But okay, and then next to WAFJ, there's a little block, and there's about 4 or 5 of those. What does that fall? That's kind of deep.
No, those were not. No, what
are
they
they?
Were. Townhomes, yeah, those are townhomes.
But
there's also the ones.
But that's multiple units on a parcel.
So I'm thinking this out. I'm talking this out loud. I'm saying this to your point, Kevin, is if there are pockets where somebody could come in and put some duplexes that make sense, I think that's something I could entertain that. That's different than sprawling land, and we're going to put up a 300-unit apartment complex and we have no control.
Totally
That's
agree
my
with you.
concern.
Yeah, and I'm on the same page.
So I think we may need to consider that point. That's not a bad idea.
One more question. Let's say, I know we're going to discuss Kellogg property further, but would that affect them with their apartments and their
planned development?
Huh?
It's a planned development.
Planned development, so that would.
I think I got my orders.
I mean, I think we should.
That would be that's just me speaking. That would be my preference.
Yeah. I like the ones that are on, the new ones on 5 Notch, right near the gas station. The ones that you said by WAFJ, I think they look very nice.
Now, those townhouses too.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what,
I
they
think
are
we should allow
nice
those,
looking, yeah.
but that's my personal.
Yeah.
My opinion
Those are
is
affordable too.
the same, but with the wording, we need to remove the goal is basically to prevent large, like 300 apartments. I think duplexes, triplexes. I don't know how much of that language is in the ordinance to say exactly what all to eliminate out, but I think the ultimate goal is to be sure that during this moratorium period that we're not having the large standalone apartments, but the individual smaller multifamily ones are okay.
Yeah.
So what I'd recommend, Mayor and Council, then is let the staff work up a draft ordinance based on the guidance that we think that we've heard. We'll put that on the agenda, and then that way, if it's as you require it, then we can have it for you to consider. And if it's not, or you want to amend the ordinance that's before you, you can either make the amendment or we'll just table it until we get changes done on the next next reading.
Time to Chris. Are there not that have gone down, but is there anything you can think of example-wise that someone has talked to you about, not proceed at all, but just conceptually of where they've said, hey, there is a need of a big tract that's not apartments, but that are, duplexes or, what I'm saying is, I just want to be careful about what we're getting into.
You don't want 300 duplexes on 100 acre
Maybe
land.
not. I'm not saying we don't. I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah, no.
I'm not saying maybe not. I'm just trying to get in my head.
Well, we we have approved the track off of Old Edgefield Road, and that's a subdivision of duplexes.
Okay.
So, you know, that's going to be rentals, and
That's a subdivision.
You know, that's a subdivision. Everything in there is duplexes. And the gentleman I've got a meeting with later this week would also be something similar, a neighborhood with duplexes.
Okay.
Where at on Old Edgefield Road?
Yeah, where?
It is right about where I don't know the name of the road, but where you
Kevin, what's your thoughts on that?
come
The
from.
larger size, because you were talking more smaller. I'm just wondering, does that make a difference with your insight?
I'd have to give that more thought. I don't know, Mayor. I mean, I don't think it. I mean, I don't think it does to me, but
You talking about the property at the end of the comp?
Yes, where you go down to the nursing home.
Oh, yeah. Out of it.
It's on
Wrong side
Edgefield
of it,
Road,
yeah.
but it backs up to it.
I mean, just by the nature of them being duplexes, I mean, you're still not going to have the density you're going to have on like the one being built up on Martintown Road behind the gas station and all of that. I mean, you're just not going to have that same density. So no, I mean, I don't know that makes a difference to me, but it's something I'd want to think through a little bit more.
You'll have a whole week.
Right.
All right, so that's kind of what we want Tommy to focus. Don't include the duplex in there. David, that's kind of your thinking, or not?
Looks like the difference between the duplexes versus the higher density, 4 units and so forth. I'd have to look at that a little closer to get a better feeling of that. Because when you have a duplex, it's you're gonna use up more land, and then your density just, you're not increasing it, and that's what we want, but we just don't. I'm thinking more of just the standalone like we have that's going up on Circle K and behind the Circle K and what's going on at 5, apartments. Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm saying. Just include. That's what I'm saying is you're saying include the apartment. Just include. Tommy, you said you roughly had put down a draft of a number of different properties. So
Correct.
What was that again?
That was everything other than a single family residential in our zoning ordinance. All those different classifications.
Duplex.
Now, what do you want to put a number on it, like Clemson did? That, over 50 units, over 100 units, or over, and then that gets in a slippery slope. But the most apartments come around 300.
Yep.
So you'd want to be 250 because they'll come in at 298.
No, I wouldn't want to put a number on it.
Okay.
Because then you still get yourself
that
in
was
trouble.
just an ask.
Yeah, I don't think we want to put a number on it. So that's what I'm saying. So I think the initial thought we had was the standalone, and then I think, Kevin, you did make a good point about, well, do we? I think Tommy said, well, he's added duplexes and various others. Then, well, do we want to include that or not? So that's the guidance he needs to know. And what are your thoughts? Because I'm going to be.
What do you think? Are people? I don't hear anything about duplexes or anything. It's mainly standalone apartments. That's what the citizens are saying. We have too many.
Right. Yeah,
I mean, can we just put that and not mention the duplex?
Oh, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
That's what I'm trying to figure out. What is that?
Yeah, that's what I say. Just don't
Yeah, I mean, that's.
duplex and let that go. If we see we're running into that, then we come back.
Yes, that was my guidance.
Yeah.
Okay, y'all good?
Okay.
Yes, I'm good with that. Yes.
You good with that, Tom? You understand what?
Yes.
Okay.
I think
I just want to get clarity. I didn't.
And just be clear, so I've got it in my mind correctly. This does not apply to single-family attached homes. It only the apartment complexes where they're all on one parcel.
Yep.
Sounds good. That's the way I was looking at it. Just wanted
Good. Okay.
to check.
You just assumed when you said you had a draft with a lot of other things in there. I'm thinking,
Hey, Tommy, that you thinking of that long before all this discussion? We had to go around the bush to get to the tree.
Woo. All right.
Well, I think the one slide that you put together where it shows that owner occupied 64% and we're at 35 now. I think a couple of years back you showed like a national type statistic that showed, we're in like a range. So the percentage wise is a good percentage. So I guess what we're really saying is we're trying to make sure that we stay within that percentage, that we're not turning into 65% rental type properties and down to 35.
Well,
we don't want that to swap over.
Yeah, but no, I don't want to swap. I know I was kind of amazed in that first growth planning session we did, and he gave that number. If you had told me we have 35% in apartments, I was shocked. That was kind of a little wake up for me, but anyway. Okay, you got your marching orders, Jim. You good with that?
Yes, sir.
Tommy? Okay. Woo. All right, what we got next?
All right, next up, Linda Williamson with our Riverside Village financial update. Linda said she can knock us out in under an hour and a half.
So once again, it's time for the mid-fee assessment, and this is that fee that we have put, we assess onto the Riverside Village parcels if they have not met the tax revenue that we expected them to meet in the financial model. So we calculate the mid-fee on a 3-step process. So the first step is that we calculate the annual revenue requirement and compare it to the annual assessment. And the numbers for the annual revenue requirement are on page 4 in table A. So this is how we have calculated the tax revenue that is required. And that's our interest and principal payments for the debt service, our administrative expenses, and any other available funds that we have, we don't have any allocated other funds to pay the debt with. And then our annual assessment, you'll find that on the 9th page. It's not numbered, but it's the Appendix B6. So this is where we get that number from, and that's in our financial model. So basically, if our annual revenue requirement is more than our annual assessment, we'll move to step 2. If it's less, then we don't have to calculate a mid-fee on the parcels. So this year, our annual requirement is $2,605,405, and our annual assessment is $1,686,753. So because our annual revenue requirement is more than our annual assessment, we need to move on to step 2 and calculate that mid. Next slide. Right. So the next step is comparing the sum of the tax revenues to the annual assessment. Our tax revenues, which you will find on the 10th page in Appendix C, and it is on, hold on. It's about the about the 7th column over. So our and then our annual assessment is listed there again. So on this one, if our tax revenues are more than our annual assessment, we have a potential to for all the mid fees to be 0. And if the annual assessment is more than tax revenues, we have to move to step 3.
That tax revenue is what we think those properties should be generating, right? Or they generate?
No, that's what they will generate.
They will generate.
Or what we estimate that they are going to generate. Okay. So our annual assessment of $1,686,753 is more than what the expected tax revenues are, which is the $1,504,645. So we are going to move on to step 3. Next slide. So step 3 is where we actually calculate the fee for each parcel. So we calculate the annual parcel credit and subtract that from the annual parcel assessment. So the annual parcel credit is the parcel real property tax that is going to be collected, and the assessment is the projected TIF revenues. So if the parcel revenue is greater than the assessment, the annual parcel credit is equal to the parcel assessment, then there is no annual payment needed. If the annual parcel assessment is greater than the credit, then the difference is added to the tax bill as the mid fee. Next slide. And then we've got two examples of each one of those situations. So if you look at track J, the apartments, you will see that their tax revenues are $751,106. Their annual assessment was $351,144. So their revenue is more than the assessment. So they do not have a fee added to their tax bill this year.
But do we use both formulas for each parcel to determine which one?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And then whichever one, okay.
And then, so moving on, next slide. So this is an example of one that did not meet the criteria. So this is tract K, the senior living, which is the complex that is actually under development at this time. Their tax revenue is expected to be $20,438, and our assessment was $421,744. So essentially, they're going to have a fee of $401,306 added to their tax bill as a mid fee to get their tax revenue up to where it needed to be. And just in conclusion, we have 13 parcels that will be assessed a fee, and the total fee on all 13 of those parcels is $736,522. And that's all I have for you tonight.
Very good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, council, we'll move into the presentation that you all been waiting for, which is our weekly Hurricane Helene recovery update. Next slide, please. So what I really wanted to discuss with you is what's happening now. So we have city crews that are working north of I-20 for the most part. And so a little hard to see on this map, but you've got some that are darker green and some that are lighter green. We've had city crews go through Oak Creek and Gregory Landing. And then now we've got crews into Bergen, and crews are actually working in the Walnut Lane neighborhoods currently. And so, as we discussed before, because of the size of the root balls that are out there, we've actually had to retask organize our city crews. And so now we've got what I'd call a heavy crew and a light crew. So right now we've had the heavy crew go through and remove all the things that could be removed with the equipment that they had, and now we've got the light crew coming in behind them. And I'll show you on a later slide, I believe it's got the where some of the stumps are that are having to be removed. Next slide. So as you can see here on this map, we've actually got 4 stumps that are pretty significant that are going to require some additional time to remove. And so if you put one of those stumps on the back of a lowboy tractor trailer load, it actually sticks out beyond the point of the road. And since you need a SCDOT wide load permit to remove those. So for the folks that are living north of I-20 that have seen the crews roll through your neighborhoods, yet leave one enormous stump behind, those are still going to be remediated, but they're not going to be done until we get an SCDOT wide load permit to remove those and take those to the country club property. So those are the 4 major stumps that we still see north of I-20 that we'll be working on in the upcoming weeks. And for the most part, just because of the scope of the work involved, we're going to try to save those for weekends to get those addressed. But we do not have an SCDOT wide load permit in hand today. That application is in, and as those come in, we'll start moving those stumps out with our dedicated equipment. But that's a major operation because you have to put a full crew on there with wheel loaders or front end loaders, tractor trailer driver with a load boy to get the.
That big.
They are, sir.
And you had to get a permit
That is
for
amazing,
each one,
isn't
or
it?
is it just a general
I
permit?
think for the vehicle itself.
Jeez.
I know, but I've never seen that.
Crazy. Steve, how do you chop up a root ball? I mean, are they big machines? You just
So our role in this, Councilwoman, is to get it to the dump site, to the country club property, and then SDR, the Southern Disaster Recovery Company, has other equipment that they're bringing to the. Again, we're trying to expedite.
Yeah.
We could leave this and say, hey, we'll let SDR get to these. But the problem is going to be is that's going to be a much more lengthy time frame. So we're trying to accelerate from a public safety perspective, especially the root balls that are in the roadways. We want to get those off as soon as possible.
But there is a machine.
there is a machine that just grinds them up?
Yeah, R&R
Stick the
used
whole
one.
thing in that?
R&R used one down by.
Well, I'd love to go
Creighton Park.
visit.
No, well, we have a large industrial grinder that's at the Buena Vista site that they're using for that, but I believe they actually have a different piece of equipment that will split the root ball in half. They actually have to bore an auger into the root ball to split it to get that to go. I see Councilman Tools looking to see if his house is on the next slide. And then as we talked about before, we're just going to go do the first plan that we had. We're going to redo it. So ultimately, right now we've got city crews that are working exclusively north of I-20. And then Southern Disaster Recovery is currently still working on first pass for county roads that are in kind of in between Aiken and North Augusta. And as those crews get freed up, they're going to start in Savannah Barony and they'll work their way south in the exact same order that we had last time. So Savannah Barony through Chanticleer through the Rapids. What we found as we worked with SDR, because they have a lot of subcontractors, they're most successful when we put them in a neighborhood that has all city roads. So when you get into some of the neighborhoods, like say around North Augusta High School that has a mix of city and county roads, sometimes that gets confusing for them. And so we found over the last couple of months, we get better throughput when we put those contracted crews on dedicated neighborhoods that are all one type of road, and then we use our city crews who are a little more nimble to work through the other neighborhoods as required. And again, go back please, some neighborhoods are going to require more time on the second pass than others. Again, we got a lot of the heavy lifting done, but you can make an example of Savannah Barony being a good one, that they had a lot of debris there in that neighborhood, and so we had a good first pass, but it's not going to be a matter of a day or two in Savannah Barony. It's going to be some time to get the rest of the debris picked up. The Rapids also has some significant round 2 debris, and you'll see a lot of the neighborhoods that border the Greenway have a significant amount of material that got pushed out for a second round of pickup. But some of the existing neighborhoods that were newer neighborhoods, again, the clear-cut neighborhoods, they're going to be much faster. We're going to be able to get through those, and we already saw that with some of the neighborhoods north of I-20, so Austin Heights, and as we move south into Rushing Waters, off 5 Notch, those neighborhoods aren't going to take a whole lot of time at all, because again, we're not seeing root balls and major debris that's out there. But some of the more established neighborhoods, as you can see in the directional arrow, those are going to take some time. So we're just going to continue to work through those. Root ball and debris. So right now, what you see that we did north of I-20, even though we left the root ball behind, the boom truck was able to get the remainder of the debris out. Next slide. I just wanted to highlight something that came out through FEMA, and this is for individual assistance, not necessarily for cities and counties, but for folks that are planning on filing for assistance individually through FEMA. That deadline is tomorrow. This has been carried in a number of our local news media outlets, but I just wanted to share with you the FEMA press release that was out. They've been putting this out every couple of days, but tomorrow is the day. So again, for our citizens that are watching, if they do not have an existing claim in, they can always amend an existing claim, but if they have not even started a claim, they need to get that claim in tomorrow with FEMA. And the information is listed there through the press release about what the website is or the phone numbers to call. Next slide. And that's all I have for tonight. We did cover a much more extensive update in the community engagement brief, which I know is not live streamed, but that presentation is located on the city's webpage. And again, if you pick any city webpage, the top banner shows Hurricane Helene. And if you click on that link, it'll take you to the Hurricane Helene page where all the briefings are listed, and I'll list this one tomorrow upon completion of the city council meeting.
All right, we've got 2 things we need to vote on. Thank you for that. That was a good program. Item 4, legal executive session, requested city administrator. In compliance with section 30-4-70A2, the city administrator requests an executive session for the purpose of discussion of negotiations incident to proposed contractual arrangements
proposed sale or purchase of property, to receive legal advice where the legal advice relates to a pending, threatened, or potential claim, or other matters covered by the attorney-client privilege, settlement of legal claims with the position of the public agency, and any other adversary situations involving the assertion against the agency of a claim. Discussion specifically related to Riverside Village. Upon returning, the council will not take any action, so we're not coming back. Do I have a motion to go for executive session for item 4?
So moved.
That's Ms. McCauley. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, Mr. Toole, all in favor? Okay, it's unanimous. While we're here also, item 5, request the city administrator in compliance with section 30-4-70A2, the city administrator requests an executive session for purpose of discussion is specifically related to provision of city services. Do you have a motion for that? All right, Ms. Carpenter, second. Mr. Buck, all in favor? Okay, it passes, so we're not coming back. Thank y'all for being here. We stand adjourned. Thank you.